Thank y'all all for coming. For those of you, I think everybody knows who I am, but we're doing a video tonight. My name is Matt Green. I am president of our local Federalist Society chapter here in Mobile, Alabama. We are the Brevard Hand Alex Howard chapter. I know we have at least one new guest in attendance tonight, Mr. Adam Strange. Adam, where are you? Right. Okay.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
I know, no kidding. Now you're famous. Okay. Well, the Federalist Society is a nonpartisan, conservative, and libertarian organization dedicated to freedom, federalism, and judicial restraint. The Federalist Society seeks to educate the legal community and the community at large through its programs and publications about how limited constitutional government based on the rule of law can have a positive effect on law and public policy. Tonight we'll be discussing the Second Amendment, and in particular, a case that most people probably, it's certainly not taught in history, and it's almost been forgotten by many until recently with the recent discussions, particularly in Congress, and I know in the states of Colorado and New York, of increased federal and state regulations on firearms. I thought this would be a timely topic to discuss, and basically, the Second Amendment, it has several purposes, one of which is for self-defense purposes. But another purpose of the Second Amendment that many people don't like to discuss, and we'll probably get into, or we are going to get into a situation that's, I guess it would be constitutionally taboo, but it's something that did happen, and it's something that there are a lot of lessons to be learned from it. I know, I'm getting to it, but the story tonight, I'll be telling part of the story, but I'll also have some help from one of the participants in the story.
People from a despotic government.
Well, that's right. Well, we'll get to that. Patient. Judge Johnson and I have actually given a similar presentation on the Heller case to the ends of court. It's been about 4 or 5 years ago, but we have some similar slides in this presentation. But Bill White, there'll be some audio clips from him. In 1946, Bill White returned home. He was a GI. He enlisted in the Marines when he was 17 years old. He was born and raised in Athens, Tennessee, McMinn County. It's, for those of you who don't know, it's halfway between Chattanooga and Knoxville. And Bill was one of the main, he was the GI leader in the case to fight back despotic government. And there'll be some audio clips in here. I'll play of him. In 2000, the University of Tennessee, they have a war veterans oral history project that they did, and they did an interview with him in 2000. And they actually sent me an audio of it. So he talks about it, what happened. It's really fascinating. So hopefully you'll get as much enjoyment out of it as I did. This is like I said, this is a timely legal topic. I put this in here for you, Judge Johnson.
Yeah,
it is. And something's missing there. Yeah, that's right. For those of you who, most of you might know, James Madison was the author of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Notice he didn't say the state, it said a state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And recently in the Heller case, the United States Supreme Court said that's a fundamental constitutional right. And also, it's also one that applies not only to the federal government, but also applies to local and state governments, thanks to the McDonald's decision from the United States Supreme Court as well. Justice Joseph Story, a very famous Supreme Court justice. I think he was 34 years old when he was nominated to be on the United States Supreme Court. He just said that the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly been considered as the palladium of the liberties of a republic, since it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation and arbitrary power of rulers, and it will generally, even if these are successful in the first instance, enable the people to resist. Judge Kaczynski, he's a chief judge of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, refers to the Second Amendment as a doomsday provision, and that's the title of our presentation, the Second Amendment as a doomsday provision. It's designed to protect individuals against despotism and tyranny. It's not it's not difficult to understand why he feels that way. He's Romanian by birth. His parents were Holocaust survivors, and they moved to the United States when he was just a young child. And when you look at and see the opinion I'm about to show you, which I believe is the Lockyer decision, he uses some language in there that really is telling about one of the reasons why, particularly those who aren't necessarily Native Americans, how they appreciate the Second Amendment and why they do, because of their personal experiences with tyranny. And in the Silveria v. Lockyer decision, he penned this following quote: "My excellent colleagues have forgotten these bitter lessons of history. The prospect of tyranny may not grab the headlines the way vivid stories of crime routinely do, but few said the Third Reich until it was too late, saw the Third Reich until it was too late. The Second Amendment is a doomsday provision, one designed for those exceptionally rare circumstances where all other rights have failed, where the government refuses to stand for re-election and silences those who protest, where courts have lost the courage to oppose or can find no one to enforce their decrees. However improbable these contingencies may seem today, facing them unprepared is a mistake that free people get to make only once." It's unfortunately, we've never had, most of us here never had to deal with that situation, but in 1946, returning GI veterans faced that exact scenario. And this happened in Athens, Tennessee. It's America's forgotten history. It's been referred to by historians as the last certified armed engagement between United States citizens and their government. And basically, the story is what happens when a government abandons its respect for the rule of law, its respect for its constitutional principles. What rights should the people have, and what rights do they have? This is an interesting piece. I think Chris Matthews probably expressed disbelief, or I won't say ignorance, but he'd never heard of the story. And this is an interesting clip between where Larry Pratt educates Mr. Matthews on the situation in Athens.
We didn't bring our hummingbird to work. Isn't that what it's called?
School. Let's go in another question, another direction here. What they're called assault rifles. They're semi-automatic.
Right.
We've outlawed automatic weapons since the 1930s, since the days of Machine Gun Kelly. What's wrong with making the same rule effective? You need a special license to have a semi-automatic weapon. What's wrong with that rule, sir?
Well, we're talking about each little increment.
No,
slippery slope. Problem.
No, let's not get into slippery slope.
Would we be a worse country? Let's not get into it. We're going to stop
you
right
believe that would
here.
this be a less free country if you couldn't have an assault rifle?
Yeah, because we have guns fundamentally protected by the Second Amendment.
Well, wait a minute. What?
I thought you'd hear that. Yes, we have guns in order to control the government.
And where have assault rifles been useful in controlling the size or direction or policy of the United States government in our history?
Well, the Brown Bess rifle was used to win our independence. The militiamen's...
From the British?
Yes.
Let's talk about our government.
The militiamen used their militia rifles under Andy Jackson to defend New Orleans against the British. So
against the British.
Do have a history.
When have guns been useful in curtailing the power or purpose of the federal government?
Athens, Tennessee, 1946. Townsmen rose up against corrupt government and threw them out at the point of a gun.
There was a really long pause after that. Matthews was just taken aback. He didn't know what he was talking about. But I think a lot of... What's that?
Do you have a long pause?
Yeah, I have the whole... Well, we got a few slides to go. All right, for those of you, this is Athens. In 1946, it's had a population around 6,930. That's it in the little red there. It's in McMinn County, Tennessee. Athens is the county seat. Back then it was too. It's also called the friendliest city, ironically. Here's a little clip about Athens from their Chamber of Commerce.
From the east, the Great Smoky Mountains tower over rooftops. From the west, the city is embraced by the wild beauty of the Cumberland Plateau. Out of the peaceful mountains of McMinn County rises the city of Athens, Tennessee, a city alive to the pulse of a modern world. 10 miles southeast of Athens, mountains surround the neighboring city of Etowah, another thriving urban community. It's that unusual blending of rural ruggedness and urban convenience that makes these communities so special. McMinn County is a wooded wonderland of lakes and rivers. Athens, the county seat, is a culture center with urban facilities more advanced than towns twice its size.
Left out the part about ground zero for the Second Amendment in 1946, but even in their, they had a 150-year anniversary. I think it was a sesquicentennial. They didn't mention it. 1946, this is a guy named E.H. He was Boss Crump. He was a political power broker. He basically ruled the state of Tennessee. He was from Shelby County and in Memphis. He used to be the mayor of Memphis. And he established a pretty powerful machine, and his tentacles reached all over the state. He was responsible for senators getting elected and, among other things, and congressmen. And his tentacles reached as far east as to McMinn County. And he actually, this was the cover of Time magazine in May of 1946, just about before the Battle of Athens happened August 1st, 1946. This was in May of 1946. He made the cover of Time magazine, where you could see the political cronies and underlings he's got all over the state. He was a Democrat, and he ruled with an iron fist. That's the Time magazine. The two main people involved that had run roughshod over the McMinn County was a man by the name of Paul Cantrell. He was the state senator. He was actually the former sheriff, but he was actually running for sheriff in 1946.
Sounds like the situation we had here.
Yeah.
The state senator and the sheriff.
And the sheriff at the time of the election was running for his spot, Cantrell's spot. So Mansfield was the sitting sheriff running for state senator, and Cantrell was the state senator running for his old position for sheriff in McMinn County. The townspeople had lost complete faith in their government by 1946. The McMinn County Democrats had been ruling. They got swept into power in 1936 under the FDR New Deal program. They had just about purged all the Republicans and any other opposition out of power. The sheriff, Paul Mansfield, they were called fee grabbers. These sheriffs, these deputies, what they do was they received they received fees for all the
Like food fund.
they received a fee for every person booked, incarcerated, and released.
That's like bonding fees.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. The more arrests, the more money for the sheriff. Deputies boarded buses routinely. What they do, and a lot of these, there'd be a lot of GIs on them, and they would arrest innocent, sleepy-eyed passengers and charge them with public intoxication and charge them $16.50 for release. Apparently, they had what they called they had a lawyer who they called the informer, who would basically tell them, "You need to come in here and plead guilty, pay your $16, get out of here, and go on about your business." In 4 years, Sheriff Mansfield had netted about $104,000 under this fee program, over $25,000 a year. And not only that, under Mansfield, there was rampant election fraud. Ballots had been counted outside the presence of opposition voters, opposition poll watchers. Deads were routinely voted. Voter intimidation was rampant. Violence, threats, and assaults were more the order of the day. And the courts, they had been purged. McMinn County courts they were the only, I guess, section of the government in McMinn County that were still controlled by the GOP, the Republicans. They directed the county to purchase voting machines. The Republicans did. Well, the Cantrell Democrats responded by having a bill passed abolishing the court and sold the machines to, quote, save the county money. So that way they do their own jail. They don't do ballot count. They do their own ballot counts at the jail outside the presence. Don't need no machines for that. The Department of Justice actually investigated some misappropriations of WPA funds. They were able to get an indictment and tried one of the political minions in the McMinn County political democratic machine. An indictment was returned. The jury actually convicted him. The U.S. District Judge in Chattanooga issued the sentence of law. He fined him 1 cent in lieu of cost and sentenced him to remain in the custody of the marshal for 1 hour. So you have the courts now that are been abolished, and now the court, and then the prosecutions, where their law wasn't being enforced. The legislature, the Democrats introduced a bill, enact to redistrict McMinn County. They reduced the number of voting precincts for 23 to 12, much easier to steal and monitor. They reduced the number of the justices of peace from 14 to 7, consolidating their power even further. The bill was signed into law by the Tennessee governor, then Prentice Cooper, in February of 41. Pretty much that wiped away any Republican opposition, and it paved the way for just complete oppression. As I said, they'd stolen ballot boxes in these elections leading up to the 46 election. This was routine for them. They counted ballots without opposition watchers present. They bribed voters with money and booze and threatened and assaulted voters. The GIs, many of them now were coming home. They'd been gone for 4 or 5 years, and they get back, and they're just devastated by seeing a lot of their parents have been beaten and cajoled. They were routinely arrested. Many of them, as I said, had just gotten back from the Pacific or in the European theater, and being all that they saw, they'd go out and have a good time and have a couple drinks, and these deputies would come in and rough them up, lock them up, and arrest all of them, and just abused them. So finally, they had enough. In April of 1946, there was a secret meeting. About 5 or 6 of these GIs, they got together and said, "Enough is enough. We got enough. We could form our own ticket, and if we can guarantee that there will be an honest election, which is easier said than done, we could win this thing." So the number of people, the identity of those persons has never been really disclosed, other than 1 or 2. They kept it a secret. What they did have a decision that they made to have a mass meeting, and it would only be attended by, and the only people that would be admitted would be veterans, and they'd have to have proof to gain admission, and they called it a mass meeting. And what they did, and about a month later, in May of 1946, they fielded a nonpartisan ticket. I mean, there were Democrats and Republicans, but they didn't run it under any party. The only thing they had in common was they wanted every vote to be cast as every vote to be cast as counted as cast, and have an honest election. They picked a guy named Knox Henry for sheriff. He was a GI wounded in North Africa. He ran a filling station when he got back home. There was a guy named Frank Carmichael, who was a county trustee. He was badly wounded at St. Lo near Normandy. Jim Buttram was the campaign manager for the GI ticket. He was a grocer. A guy named George Painter was the county clerk. W.E. Hamby was running for circuit clerk, and Charles Pickett as a register. So this is their ticket, and that's their promise. They campaigned really hard around McMinn County with the single promise that every vote cast will count.
You said I would be found my GI ticket in the next election and kick him out. Well, we filmed the ticket, right?
This is Bill White.
Run for every office in McMinn County.
All right, so they got every office that they're going to, every office in McMinn County, they fielded a GI candidate. All right, so they know this is not going to be easy, and they reach out for help. They know that the Cantrell and his forces are going to be out trying to steal the election. So they send a letter, a written request to the governor. He doesn't respond. They request assistance from the United States Attorney General. No response. They even seek assistance from the FBI local field office in Knoxville. Of course, the FBI refused without approval from Washington. So everybody turns their back on them. They're on their own. This was an advertisement they ran in the newspaper. There was called the Athenian, or the Athens Post-Athenian. This is the ad that they ran. These young men fought and won a war for good government. They know what it takes and know what it means to have a clean government. And they are energetic enough, honest enough, and intelligent enough to give us good, clean government. And that's basically their platform they ran on. All right, so they realize that they're going to have to, it's going to be a tough go. And Bill White, he's young now. This is him. He was 17 when he went off. I think he was 22 when he got back. And they all meet, and Bill White says, this is not going to be easy, and you're going to have to fight fire with fire. And this is what he told them.
And I got up and I said, listen, I said, do you think that they're going to let you win this election? I said, those people have been taking these elections for years with a bunch of armed thugs. I said, if you haven't got the guts enough to stand up and fight fire with fire, you ain't going to win. They said, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And I said, well, you better do it or you're wasting your time.
And most of these guys were probably 5 to 10 years older than him. He, like I said, he was in the 1st Marine Division. He'd been fought at Guadalcanal, Tarawa. He'd been wounded twice. He had 2 Purple Hearts, so he'd paid his dues. And he knows exactly what they're going to have to do. The United States representative, he was actually from Athens. He was, I can't remember what party. I think he was Republican, but he knows something bad's about to happen. So he gets up on the House floor and gives a speech in July of '46, about a month before. He says, and this is just a clip of what he said on the House floor because he's warning everybody. He says, neither a deputy sheriff nor a policeman has the right to hold an election in Tennessee. While armed, neither a deputy sheriff nor a policeman in Tennessee has any more right to be armed with a pistol or a blackjack to intimidate or assault a voter than a robber or a burglar has to be armed and to use a pistol or blackjack in the perpetration of a robbery or burglary. And this is the kicker right here. Under the laws of Tennessee, the citizens of McMinn County have the right and the power to enforce the law. So many of the veterans heard that, no doubt, and took solace in that fact. And he finished up by saying, and they have the power to enforce an honest election on Thursday, August the 1st, 1946. Very interesting there.
It's interesting why the boss Crump let him stay in office.
Yes, very good. Just to tell you the kind of people that were on the ballot with the McMinn County political machine. This is a guy named, he called him Bloody McMinn. He was Bloody McMinn deputy. He was a revenuer at one time, a revenue agent, prohibition agent. He had 7 justifiable kills while in law enforcement. He was the circuit clerk, and he was actually the former McMinn County sheriff. Now, he's very good at what he's done.
Justifiable kills, too.
Yes.
Our circuit clerk.
That's right. Now, either he's very good at what he did or he wasn't very good at all. But 7 that's a lot. That's a lot. So that's the kind of people they had in their machine, and that's a picture of him. Election day rolls around. There's already starting to be some ominous clouds gathering. For the first time, the downtown merchants close all the shops under the pretense of allowing employees to vote. They know there's going to be a couple people pitched through plate glass windows probably. The Athens mayor, Paul Walker, announces he would be vacationing on election day. And there was about 200 new fresh faces, many of whom looked like they had just been released from prison, who'd been newly deputized with firearms, bludgeons, and blackjacks, monitoring and walking up and down the streets of Athens. Many people had never seen them, and out-of-town plates were noticed on their vehicles. All right, so one of the main precincts, one of the biggest precincts was at the Waterworks precinct is in downtown Athens. It was the 11th precinct. There were about 6 Cantrell men working it. Of course, 3 of them had firearms on, working the precinct. There was a particularly horrible deputy, kind of a sadist by the name of Wendy Wise, who was just threatening people, making life difficult. There were 2 GI poll watchers in there, a gentleman by the name of Ed Vestal and Charles Scott Jr. After they witnessed an African-American try to vote and denied the right to vote, they objected. Of course, they pulled a weapon on them, held them hostage. What really saved them is that 2 newspapermen happened to be walking by, and they pointed, these GIs pointed or waving to the newspapermen, and they said, well, you can shoot us if you want to, but you're not going to do this in front of the news. And they literally, the 2 GIs, jumped through the plate glass window. The deputy runs out chasing them. I think that's Wendy Wise. That's him right there. He is waving a pistol at him. This is the GI that jumped out the window with his hands up. You can see the crowd looking on. Wendy Wise chases the GIs out, brandishing a pistol, yelling, "You GD SOB, I'll kill you!" And then one woman on the street goes, "Oh God, here it comes!" So it's really about to fall to pieces. And all the GIs, a lot of the GIs were out in the street watching this, and it was really horrific. There is the gentleman who tried to vote. His name was old man Gillespie, Tom Gillespie, and here's what Bill White said about that. Let me go back.
Well, when the election come off, Pat Mansfield had 200 deputies armed and paying them $50 a day to help him. And he's going to take that election. So they started beating up some deputies, started beating up the GIs that we had, poll watchers at precincts if they objected to anything they was doing. Beating them up, put them in jail.
And in fact, they did that. Well, whenever they objected, of course, they were becoming unruly and disorderly, and a couple of the GIs went to jail. This is a picture of them. They actually, after the black man who tried to vote Mr. Gillespie, one of the deputies actually shot him because he shot him as he was trying to leave for trying to vote. Of course, they took him to the jail. It was about 3:45 late in the afternoon when they wound up just closing the precinct down and taking the ballot boxes with them. And this is them loading it into the sheriff's cars. They said that one of the deputy sheriff's vehicle siren came screaming up the road, and everybody gathered around, and the deputies cordoned off the area and stole the ballot box and took it back to the jail. It wasn't any better at the county courthouse precinct. Voters with no poll, back then they had the poll tax. You're supposed to show your receipt. They were letting voters vote without showing their poll tax receipts. Voters were actually paid by the deputies with money or promises of alcohol. The day before the election, some of the Cantrell deputies were arrested or pulled over by a neighboring county with a carload of whiskey and alcohol. They said it was election day whiskey. They were arrested. Of course, they denied it was. The sheriff denied they were under his employ and that they were his deputies. There was a 12th precinct. This was another thing. This was another big precinct in town. It was at the Dixie Cafe. There was a Cantrell deputy and election judge. His name was Menace Wilburn, where he assaulted 2 GI poll watchers and had them arrested. One of them was named Bob Harrell and Leslie Dooley. Dooley had actually lost an arm in North Africa in the North African campaign fighting Rommel. Both of them witnessed voting violations. The deputy was letting minors vote and paying cash to other voters, and they objected. When they grabbed the hand of one of the voters trying to vote, Menace pulled out his blackjack and assaulted, beat him about the head. You can see the bandage on his head there. This is after. And kicked him while he was down and had them both arrested.
Why they both smile?
Well, you'll see at the end. So they had him arrested and ordered him hauled off to jail. They pulled guns on him, and they escorted him out with shotguns and marched him across the lawn to the jail where they were doing the ballot counting. By this time, Bill White and several other GIs had enough. There was what they called the gentleman by the name of, I think his last name was S&K. They had a garage, and the GIs were congregating around there, and the law enforcement, the deputies said, well, when the sheriff said, y'all need to go arrest these people. So, of course, they send 2 armed deputies down there to where these GIs were. They were immediately assaulted, stripped of their firearms, and huddled into the back of the garage. They send 2 more deputies down there, same thing, beaten badly, stripped of their firearms. And finally, they got up to 7 of them that were basically taken captive by the GIs. And here's what Bill White said about that.
Well, anyway, I got some boys. We took them deputies out and went back out in the country and stripped them off, whipped them, tied them up and whipped them, with hickories and few little clubs about the size of your thumb. And then, give them a good whipping for being there. Some of them out of Georgia, 3 of them out of Georgia.
So they stripped stripped off their clothes, took them out of town in the middle of the woods, and whipped them with hickories. Nobody was killed, though, but and many of them probably have just been deputized, and I'm probably not sure of their veracity. All right, so Bill White's getting ready. He's had enough. It's time he's going to step in and do something about it.
And they had 2 or 3 precincts they took a birthday jail. That's their bad mistake. And I got those 60 men. I said, boys, let's go.
60 GIs he's got with him. So he got a pretty good little force. He said, boys, let's go.
Hey, what was that previously where it said GI candidates abandoned GI?
Yeah, but at this time, the GI candidates, they don't have anything to do with violence. And Bill White says that's the only way this is going to be done. That's the only way we can protect our rights and make sure we get a fair election. Plus, they've kidnapped they've taken under color of law under color of law. They've kidnapped 2 of our GIs and they got them holed up in the jail without. And not only that, they'd also arrested several media members. Chattanooga News had several of their photographers and media members. One of them had been arrested for photographing some of the incidences. They were assaulted. Their cameras were destroyed. So it wasn't just the GIs. It was complete and total intimidation. All right, this is the armory, and Bill White. He decides that they need some firearms. So this is what happens.
And so I got them together down there again. I said, listen, boys. I said, there's all kinds of guns out there in that armor. Ammunition, guns too. I said, Edsel Underwood. He's kind of playing my lieutenant, you know. I said, take 5 or 6 of these men out there and bring in that army and get them going. And I said, all right, here's this old man that's head of that army. And I said, we'll see if he's got the keys. I got on one side of him, that's got on the other. I said, where's the damn keys for this army out there? Here, playing with the government. You playing with the government now? No, you won't. I said, where's the keys? In my best part, he said, I ain't got the keys to that ammunition and them guns in there now. Well, we got the keys to the front door off from him. And what was his name? His name was, what it was. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, he was a major out there. Anyway, he gave us the key for the front door and went out there. That's the lid. Opened the front door and then busted in the rest of it. And got 60 .30-06 rifles, Enfields, and 2 subatomic machine guns. And all the ammunition they could carry.
So they're ready. They've kind of crossed the line or the point of no return now.
We had a GI headquarters down there. And I come in down there about 8:30. GI headquarters. And Jim Butler was in there, one of the head of the GI ticket, you know, campaign manager. And I had these men with me. They already had him scared to death. And he locked the door on me. And I was like hollering through the door. And he said, my God, you're going to get us all killed. You're going to get us all killed. I said, well, wham, I just kicked the door. Took him on in there. I said, you might do it. I said, what you can do, Jim, if you don't like what we're doing, you can leave out of here. Well, that's what Jim Bud done. He left out there. And in the meantime, they got together, all those men that we had running for office, joined him and all left. And just left me and my gang there. Well, that's all right. Maybe they weren't going to do no fighting, no way. They wasn't warriors. And they had been in the military, but they wasn't frontline warriors. But I had them. And I said, boys, I said, get out. Get in touch with every GI you can now. Get them back here. I said, we're going to organize big.
And they did. They had even some GIs from neighboring towns. Etowah came in. And there was about 60 of them when it was all said and done. So the GIs now march march on the jail where their two of their GI comrades are locked in there and held hostage. They demand, Bill White and some of the GIs demand the release of the ballot boxes too. They had been taken before the polls had closed under gunpoint and were being counted and being manipulated as they surrounded the jail. And this is another segment where Bill talks about the ballot box issues and the hostages.
I said, you damn thief grabbers, bring them damn ballot boxes out of there.
He yelled this to them. So they're surrounding it, and they're holed up. The deputies they're in the jail. Interesting. I found this interesting. This was all going down. There were newspaper men all around town. They were all pouring in because they were hearing about what was going on. They had radio back then, and one of the newspaper men, Lowell F. Arterburn, said, "I don't know where they got the guns, but I know where they learned to use them." They were really trying to find out what was going on as well. And the battle starts.
And the battle started. They began to shoot out of the jail at us. And every time they'd shoot, we'd open a volley of fire. You wouldn't believe how them 60 men, them 30-06 rifle. And man, that scared them people to death down there in that jail, a lot of them.
You can see how young they are there. All right, so around this time, they have a phone in there, Cantrell's in there, Mansfield in there, and all these government, the sheriffs that had stolen, were trying to steal the election. They called on their friend, his name is Woods, George Woods, I believe his name is, and they get word to George to call the governor. We need the Guard. We need the National Guard. So George Woods, who was also actually Speaker of the House as well, called in a favor to the governor, and that's actually Governor Jim Nance McCord. That's him right there with the Tennessee State Guard. So Governor McCord gets the call from Woods, and he orders the Guard activated.
Problem is they sent the band.
All right, so the leader, the Brigadier General, is a guy named Hilton Butler. Does anybody know who that man sitting down next to him is right there? Alvin York.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the only picture I could find of the Brigadier General Butler. But anyway, Butler is there, and then the head of the State Highway Patrol, they're in Chattanooga. They're getting ready to march to Athens to go fight these GIs, when apparently the head of the Highway Patrol discovers that one of his chief deputies is holed up in the jail with the McMinn forces, and he'd given that deputy of his specific orders not to get involved in that election. So he expresses his concern, and the Brigadier General starts to figure out this is politics. This is what this is about. So he refuses until he gets further instructions from the governor to march his guys down to Athens. And he reportedly said, "My obligations are to protect life and property, not political interests." So the National Guard stood down and never responded that night to Athens. So this is where it gets interesting. The battle goes on from about 8 or 9 o'clock that night till about 3:30 that morning. They shoot and fire, and finally Bill tells the story about exactly what happened towards the end of the battle.
Far on them.
They called it the Bastille, the jail.
I hollered down there, I said, you damn thief grabbers, bring them damn ballot boxes out of there. That's just what I said. He didn't make a move down there. Further, one of them said, "My God, I heard a boat click." Down there, one of them grabbers did, Thief grabbers, and they started scouting around. And I had a pistol in my belt with a shotgun. I had a shotgun and a rifle. And I pulled a pistol and started firing down there at him. Well, when I did that, the whole line up there started firing down there into me. A lot of them got into jail, some of them didn't, some of them got shot and was laying outside. And the battle started. They began to shoot out of the jail at us. And every time they'd shoot, we'd open a volley of fire. You wouldn't believe it, them 60 men, them 30-06 rifle. And man, that scared them people to death down there in that jail, a lot of them. So the battle went on, raged on, and they was trying to slip out. But before, I'd sent 6 men down there on the corner to open fire in the courthouse to scare those deputies down there. There's a lot of deputies down there. Keep them from joining the deputies up at the jailhouse. And they sat down there and fired several rounds through the courthouse. Just held them all down at bay down there. Then I'd spent some scouts behind the jail had to see what they were doing, slipping anybody in the jail. Well, one of the scouts come back and told me that some of them coming out of that jail running off. I said, that's good.
That's one of the
I
deputies.
said, don't fire on them if they're running, if they're not armed. I said, let them go. And he said, okay, and they went back around there, and they didn't fire on them. They just let them go, but they was throwing the arms down and leaving out of that jail behind. And the firing kept on. And about every hour I'd ask them if they were ready to give up. They wouldn't say nothing. So I had some boys go out and get some dynamite out of the old. Well, the county had a place out there where they kept dynamite, and I knew where it was, and I sent them out there to get a case of dynamite. They went out there and brought a case of dynamite back. Some of them, GIs, went down and got some gasoline and oil mixed and made Molly cocktails out of it. They was throwing Molly cocktails down there, and they was hitting on top of them cars and burned them. And first one place and another. Couldn't get them all the way down there. Great big old bottles, you know, and they couldn't throw them that far. Anyway, sitting out there next to them cars, and then we got to make them dynamite bombs. We'd put 2 or 3 sticks of dynamite together and tape it together and put a cap in there and a fuse. And we'd whirl back and throw them. Well, we couldn't get them all the way to the jail. We got them out there in them cars. They're blowing them cars up in the air and turning over, and they're gliding back on the top. Several cars down there we blowing up. And I said, boy, we're gonna have to get some charges up on that jail. I said, make up a couple of charges there. And I said, man, that's what we'll go down there and play some charges. So I made up a couple of charges. And I crawled up and put a charge on the jailhouse porch. Crawled back behind the building there, and it went off and blew the porch off. I didn't get no answer out of them. I was getting along. We've been fighting there, you know, about 4 or 5 hours. And I had this other big charge, so I went up and laid it right up against that jail. And it was a better one I put on there. When it went off, it jarred that jail, like that. First thing you know, here come a bunch of white flags out the door. So
They came out and they surrendered. Really is quite incredible. Armed insurrection against the government. This was the picture that was circulated thereafter. That's actually Knox Henry, the sheriff-elect, who was not even there that night, but I'll get to that in a sec.
Yeah. So they come in and said, well, your boys done it. Your boys done it. I said, yeah. I said, we did do it. Otto, he had Ralph doing it.
All the leaders now are coming in congratulating the GIs for all their hard work, and you done it.
And then my boy was sitting back there in the kitchen of the old jail. He was talking it over there. Ralph Dooley came back there and he said, boys, listen. He said, you boys broke in the army out there and got all them guns. And I said, he said, you wounded a lot of people and hurt them bad. And he said, you blowed up a lot of these cars. He said, they're going to be in here trying to prosecute you. But said, if you don't say nothing, they can't find out who did it. Said, I'll get Otto and Jim Butler here and some of the rest of you boys get up here, make statements in the newspapers. A newspaper reporter gang in there then, you know. And on this national hookup here on the radio, and said, we'll let them make all the statements, let them have some credit, give them some credit. And said they got sworn affidavits, they wasn't even here in this.
Which was true.
And they can get by with it, and said, you boys can't. And I thought that sounded pretty reasonable, though, you're trying to help us, you see. Well, I said, okay. I said, we're not going to say nothing about those newspaper reporters, none of that hook up there anyway. I said, we already made up our mind not to say anything. I said, the FBI and everybody ought to be in here, which they were. And I said, if they can't find out who done it, I said, there ain't nothing they can do about it. But shoot, they knew who done it. Anyway, the papers gobbled up all the tale and made heroes out of it. The paper, now that's what they wanted, because they was connected with the Republican Party. The GIs did it, but they wanted some credit for it, you see. So they can run for office. And they did run for office and they were elected. The old boys that done it never got a bit of credit and never got anything out of it. That's where things happen that way. That's what I'm saying about them battles. It happens that way in them battles too.
So, and that's exactly what happened. They, for about 30 years until a book came out where Bill White tells his side of the story after all the applicable statute of limitations had run, they paraded all the GI leaders, many of whom weren't even there that night and did not participate in it. It was mostly Bill White and his 60 soldiers. And all the major news outlets and the media outlets pick up and take photographs of you saw that one with the sheriff there, and they get all the credit. And
How did they count the votes?
well, I'm going to get to that.
Did they win the ballot count, or did they just...
The GI ticket wins the election 2-1 on what they call an honest vote count. When they busted in the jail, they found those ballot boxes, but they found a bunch of blank ballots as well that they were going to stuff them with. And some of them they found them some had been flushed in the commodes, and they were strewed all over what they called the bullpen, which was the jail cell where they did the official Cantrell count. Actually, this is a Mobile paper that ran an article on the cover paper. Troops were called in, election riot. The Mobile paper actually wrote an editorial condemning violence but warning against the machine politics. GIs actually, it wasn't just the GIs. By the time that this happens, about 3:45 in the morning when they surrender, there's a large amount of people. The community frustration was just exploded. And you could see after the results, the cars had been flipped over. There was a lot of unrest and strife. Several of the deputies, after they arrested the deputies, and then in a kind of a show, the GIs marched them around the parade, or actually paraded them around the town square. One was the one who shot the African American was viciously assaulted by an elderly man who'd been, quote, abused by him. The deputy was assaulted. His throat was slit, and he wound up living. But it was a miracle that he did. The GIs take to the streets. They restore law and order. By 4 o'clock sunrise, they had restored order to the town. They were armed with rifles. They patrolled the streets to maintain order. They raided and shut down a lot of the gambling and vice dens that had been operating around town and provided a lot of money to the Cantrell political machine. And they also ensured the safety of the special deputies, those people that they brought in that were in their custody. Here's some of the pictures of the joints, the gambling devices they seized. They have a town meeting was called, I think it was the next day, where they elect, they don't have a government now. The sheriff has left. He fled after this was over. Cantrell fled. There's no government right now. So that they meet in their county courthourhouse. Emergency 3-man commission was elected as interim government. They immediately call into session the McMinn County Quarterly Court. That was their legislative body. And they were established an interim government until the new election could be certified. The Reverend Bernie Hampton was a Methodist minister. He addressed the mass meeting by reading the 23rd Psalm and seeking the guidance as to how the town should proceed with the new government. What they wound up doing is at a vote at the town meeting, they threw out I think it was three or six of the precincts where there were allegations of voter tampering. So they discarded those precincts and counted the ones that had been properly monitored. And when they did that, the GI ticket won 2-1. A day or two later, there was rumors that Mansfield will come back with the National Guard or with more troops or deputies. So the townspeople, that's the minister right there. If you see they're all got guns, they call another meeting where all the veterans, all the GIs come back, and in this they are calling support from outside town. And literally they're expecting a shootout in the streets of Athens, waiting for Mansfield to come back. There were reports that they had GIs positioned all along the tops of many of the buildings in town and at the courthouse, waiting for the counterattack that never occurred. This is the aftermath. The whole town government wound up resigning. The Athens City Council, the mayor and the Board of Aldermen resigned. The McMinn County regime was officially ousted. I think there were 4 Athens police officers. They resigned. The county court was called into session by the 3-member commission. They threw out the results of the precincts found in the jail and certified the GI slate as winners. They established a good government league, and what they did is instead of they wanted to abolish the fee system that the sheriff had gotten all that money on, so they agreed to establish a $5,000 salary cap, and the rest of it would go back into the county general fund above and beyond that $5,000. Several days later, when they're having, what they bring in, by the way, it's just like on a Monday, they're having their county court session. Several hundred people are in the courtroom waiting for the results of how the election is going to be certified. They bring in George Woods, who was in the McMinn Democratic machine. He was escorted from the county line under GI protection because he was also a member of the election board who had to certify the election, and he was the only one left. And he came in under GI escort and protection and certified the GI ticket as the winners of the election. There were also at the meeting that was delivered the resignation of the sheriff. He gave a written statement. Since there remain only 27 days of my term as sheriff of McMinn County, Tennessee, and since there is a continuation of the state of insurrection in McMinn County, which has existed since August the 1st, 1946, and since the appointment of an ad interim sheriff would be conducive to quieting of the insurrection and restoring order, I hereby tender my resignation as sheriff of McMinn County, Tennessee, effective August 3rd, 1946, and request immediate appointment of the Honorable Knox Henry, sheriff-elect, to fill the remainder of my unexpired term. He later told members of the media that I'm just going to get back to my railroading, working for the railroad, and that's what he did. Cantrell resigned as well. The reaction among the media, most of it is initially was very condemned it. Among the exceptions was Eleanor Roosevelt, former First Lady. She said that, she wrote, "We in the USA have had a rude awakening. If a political machine does not allow the people free expression, then freedom-loving people lose faith in the machinery under which their government functions. We may deplore the use of force, but we must also recognize the lesson which this incident points for us all."
She packed a pistol among...
I know. This is one of my favorite headlines. This is from the Baton Rouge Morning Advocate shortly after August 6th. Legal law returns to Athens. Deposed leader certifies victory of vet candidates. This is the Time magazine ran a story on it. This is the August 12th, 1946 piece on it called Battle of the Ballots. These were all the special deputies that were held. They were actually arrested and held for about 12 hours and later released by the GIs later that day after the crowd had dispersed. The Chattanooga Times wrote this editorial: "Revolutions, a set of Frenchmen who saw the days of 1789 are not made with rose water." Theodore White, who was a Pulitzer Prize winner of Harper's Magazine, was actually in the area at the time and reported, and he wrote this. On the one hand, the common law says that every citizen has a right to prevent a crime or felony taking place. On the other hand, to take the jail by storm against the lawfully deputized thugs seemed perilously close to insurrection. And I think that's how many felt about it. If all else fails too, look at the Tennessee Constitution. Under the Declaration of their Rights, this was very interesting. Article 1, particularly Section 2, I don't even think Alabama has language this strong, and this is still in effect today, and it was then. It says, Section 2, Article 1 of the Declaration of Rights, the government being instituted for the common benefit, the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. I thought that's a pretty powerful statement. Nobody even reported that in the news. They talked about common law and the legality of the situation. And then Section 26 is their right to possess and keep and bear arms, that the citizens of this state have a right to keep and to bear arms for the common defense, but the legislature shall have power by law to regulate the wearing of arms with a view to prevent crime. But Section 2 is, I guess, the doctrine of non-resistance is specifically disavowed and referred to as slavish, absurd, and destructive of good and happiness of mankind. In 1992, the story kind of resurfaces. Hallmark made a movie about it. It's a dramatized version of it. Tom Sizemore's in it. It's called An American Story. It's actually online on YouTube right now, and you can watch it. Here's the epilogue. This is Bill White in later years. The frontline GIs fade from the battle, fade into the background as the political GIs take all the glory in the media coverage. We did that. We talked. Most of the media outlets reported that actually a deputy sheriff was slain. That was premature. No one was killed in the assault on the jail. Here's a New York Times cover story on it. Another. As I said, this is the picture that circulated all over the United States and made the AP and UPI newswire of the sheriff-elect being congratulated. He got most of the credit for the assault and the storming of the jail. He was actually quoted, though, in the New York Times. Let me go back. He says, they were going to kill me yesterday, and I had to leave town. So he admits he wasn't even there, but I think most everybody thought that he had participated in it. There's another Mobile article on it. As these things go, there was still some violence. The GIs weren't successful in quelling the violence in toto. One of the Athens city or aldermen, somebody blasted or fired a shotgun through his door, and they had reported that they were threatened, and they referred to it as the reign of terror briefly for a while, but once they resigned, most of the violence subsided. Gleefully, the congressman from Athens, the United States congressman, gave another speech on the House floor. He says, at long last, decency and honesty, liberty and law have returned to the fine county of McMinn. The bloody McMinn politician, the revenuer who I told you about earlier, his name was Evans. There was a story here, and this will be the last chapter to the Battle of Athens, if it's connected. Many say it's not. In eastern Tennessee, McMinn County, on the western roll of the Blue Ridge Mountains, this is October of '47, politics is played for keeps, right up to the gun stock. For almost 30 years, McMinn's shootingest politician has been a stocky, grim-faced Democrat named Thomas Burkett Ivins, 63. As a revenuer, a deputy marshal, and McMinn County sheriff, Burkett Ivins had never been slow on the draw. He had killed 7 men, all, it was decided, justifiably. Old Burkett was proud of his pistol prowess. No one in sight of his one good eye was going to outshoot him. After the bloodied Election Day revolution of GI veterans had swept him out of office from his circuit court clerk position last year, Ivins tried to grab control of what was left of the discredited Democratic machine. Last April, he was blocked from election as a county Democratic chairman by a faction led by one Lake Dunn and his nephews, King and Charles Dunn. A few nights later, on Etowah's, that's a nearby town, Main Street, on Etowah's Main Street, Burkett Ivins shot and killed his 8th man, ailing, limping, and unarmed Charles Dunn. At his trial, Ivins swore that Dunn had threatened to beat his brains in and rushed at him with a hunk of concrete in his upraised hands. A hung jury left Ivins free to go around, as he always had, with a .45 automatic hitched to his belt. Warrior Ivins had a gentle side. The one who knew it was his plump 4-year-old grandson, Danny Ivins. Whenever Danny visited him, Ivins sent away his vicious watchdog. It had once snapped at Danny. He took Danny along on some of his politicking trips, always bragged about him. One sunny morning last week, Ivins walked out to the garage, past the spot in his yard where he had once killed a Negro. Danny waited for Grandpa to back out of his battered 1941 Ford coupe. Ivins touched the starter button. An explosion ripped the car apart. Danny, bowled over by the blast, was not seriously hurt. Burkett Ivins lived long enough to mutter the following phrase: "I'm done in for good, but to think they would do that to my Danny." Beside him was his .45 Colt automatic. And that was the last chapter on the Battle of Athens. So now you know the rest of the story.
Don't try to